Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Murray. I'm one of the librarians at Portland Public Library in Portland, Maine, and I'm here today to read Journey to the River Sea by Eva Ibbotson, pictures by Kevin Hawkes, and published by Puffin Books. We're going to pick up where we left off with chapter 11, when Maya has been working with Clovis and Finn on their plan, and the twins, Gwendolyn and Beatrice, are starting to look for a way that they can get back at Maya. Chapter 11. By the time Clovis had been in Finn's hut for 3 days, he knew Westwood by heart. He could go upstairs and downstairs, into the attics where the maid Bella had hidden Bernard's secret pile of money, and into the cellar where he had made friends with the bats. He knew the outhouse where Bernard had kept a pet rat, and the tree to which Dudley and Joan had tied a little girl from the village and beaten her with willow twigs because she had been trespassing by the lake. And he could imitate any accent. After he's been there a week, he'll be talking like Sir Aubrey or braying like Joan, Finn said to Maya. The Goodleys had taught Clovis defense, and he had been in so many plays set in grand houses that his table manners were excellent. If he got to Westwood, Finn was sure that he could hold out for a little while. Finn had showed him a map of the north of England, and Clovis had discovered that the village where his foster mother lived was only 30 miles away, which had cheered him up a lot. But he's such a coward, Finn said to Maya. They were scraping old paint off Arabella's deck fittings, a job which Clovis did not care for. I don't think it's too cowardly to be afraid of hiding in dark cellars and waiting to be snatched by 2 horrible crows, said Maya. Finn frowned. You're always defending him, he said crossly. Well, he's alone in the world. So am I alone in the world, said Finn. No, you aren't. You've got Lila, who adores you, and Professor Glastonbury, and the chief of police, and all of the native people here. And when you get to the Zante, you'll probably have lots of relatives, aunts and uncles and cousins, maybe grandparents too. A huge family. Don't you think so? I hadn't thought of it like that. Finn did not look particularly pleased. Maya nodded. It's sure to be like that, whereas Clovis and I don't have anybody. You've got Miss Minton. It was Maya's turn to stare. 3 months ago, she hadn't known that Miss Minton existed. When she'd first seen her, she thought she was a terrifying witch. But now, there was a pause, and then, and you've got me, said Finn. Maya lifted her head and smiled at him. For a moment, she felt completely happy. Then she looked at Finn's hand resting on the tiller. But you're going away. Yes, he said, that's true, I am going away. Later that night, when Maya was back at the bungalow and Finn was frying some eggs Firo had brought for their supper, Clovis said, there's something I want to ask you about. When I was looking for Maya the first time, I asked for a place called Tapperini, or the House of Rest. Maya told me that that's what it was called and that Mrs. Carter had it on her notepaper, but no one had heard of it, and they looked sort of funny. And then the captain of the boat wouldn't put me down on the Carter's landing stage. He said it was a bad place. What did he mean? Finn sat back on his heels. He seemed to be wondering whether to speak or not. Then he said, I'll tell you, but you must promise to say nothing to Maya. And he told Clovis what had happened when the Carters first came to the Amazon. They found a native longhouse by the river and some thatched huts back in the forest. The land and the houses belonged to the Tupuri, which is the tribe to which Firo and Tappy belong, but many of the Indians had left to find work in town, and the elders of the tribe agreed to sell the land and the houses on it to the Carters. The price was agreed before a witness. A proper ceremony took place, and Mr. Carter signed the document, to which the old chief put his mark. The Tapuri asked that the House of Rest, which is what the longhouse had been called, should be left standing because a very wise medicine man had died there, and his spirit still lived in the house and did not want to be disturbed. Mr. Carter agreed to everything. Good land by the river was hard to find since so many Europeans had come to Manus to make their fortune, and the rubber trees in the surrounding forest were plentiful. The money was to be paid to the native people in 3 lots. Mr. Carter paid the first lot promptly in gold coins fetched from the bank, and the chief of the Tupuri thanked him and took his people to build themselves home further up the river. A month later, the chief's messenger came for the second lot of money and was sent away. Mr. Carter, he was told, was waiting for more gold to come from the bank in England on a special ship. The messenger went back to the forest and came a month later. He was told that the ship with the gold on it had sunk in a storm, and so it went on. The native people began by being polite and ended up shaking their fists at the Carters. Those Europeans who knew what was happening went to the chief of police, who tried to force Carter to pay what he owed, but Carter always found an excuse not to do it. Not only that, but he broke his word to the Tripuri and pulled down not only the surrounding huts in the forest, but the longhouse itself, and on that site he built his bungalow. Mrs. Carter had Taparini, or House of Rest, put on her writing paper. She thought it sounded good, but no one in Manus had ever called it that, nor would the native traders land on the Carter's landing stage, but always, like the captain who had brought Clovis, stopped higher up. And the many decent Europeans who knew what happened tried to have as little to do with the Carters as possible. After this, not many native people would come to work for the family. Those who did, Furo and Tappy and old Lila, stayed for personal reasons. Lila because she wanted to be near Finn and his father, Furo because he was her nephew, Conchita and her husband Manuel because she had a brother to support in Manus, and Tappy's younger sister Unini because she had lost her parents and looked on the Carter servants as her family. When they worked in the house, they were unforgiving and sullen, and secretly they believed that one day the old medicine man's spirit, which had been disturbed and shamed, would rise up against the Carters, and the family would get what they deserved. Clovis had been listening to Finn with a very worried face. But that's a sort of curse. Maya shouldn't live in a house that's been cursed. I know, but nobody has cursed Maya. Nobody in the world would do that. And Firo and the others have promised to look after her. They absolutely promised. And you're not going to tell Maya? No, definitely not. She's got enough to put up with those awful twins. Mrs. Carter had at last arranged Maya's piano lessons with Netta's father, Mr. Haltman. Maya went to his house before dancing class, while the twins were shopping with their mother, so she could enjoy it and not have to pretend that learning piano was boring. If there was one thing that the twins really hated, it was if Maya seemed to enjoy anything. Mr. Haltman came from Vienna, and he was a first-class musician. He not only taught Maya the piano, he understood her need to learn the songs that she heard everywhere, in the streets of Manus, on the riverboats, in the huts of the workers. It's a rich land for music, Brazil. Everything flows into everything else. In one song, you can hear the rhythm of the Africans, the poetry of the Portuguese, and the sadness of the native people. He promised to look at songs that she had written down, and he suggested, too, that she have singing lessons and train her voice, but this she wouldn't do. My mother was a singer. She was wonderful, and I don't want to try and copy her, she said. The other good thing which came out of her time with the Haltmans was Netta's friendship. The Austrian girl welcomed her wholeheartedly. She had a litter of kittens in a basket, a basset hound with soulful eyes, and a baby brother as fat as butter. Netta walked with her afterwards to the dancing class, and if Maya forgot to put on a gloomy face when she saw the twins sitting with their legs stuck out in the locker room waiting to have their shoes put on, she was in trouble. "What are you smirking about?" asked Beatrice now. "I suppose you're waiting for Sergei to ask you to dance." The twins' plan for getting rid of Maya was not going well. They had been to her room and picked over her things, but Miss Minton had heard them, and since they themselves never went out of doors, it was difficult to spy on Maya properly. The notice of reward for the capture of the taverner's son was still posted, but time was running out. Mr. Lowe and Mr. Trapwood were supposed to be living on the bishop in 3 days' time. But the twins had managed one trick. When they arrived at their lockers, they had found invitations to a birthday party at the Kaminskys on Friday night. It was Olga's birthday, and the Russians were going to celebrate in a grand manner. Now they read them, holding them up in front of Maya and giggling. "There doesn't seem to be one for you there," said Beatrice. She went to her locker, but there was nothing there. She tried desperately not to mind and failed. She had thought that Olga was as much of her friend as Sergei. Not only did it hurt to be left out, but Friday was the night that Clovis was to hide in the museum. For her to be in Manus then would have been perfect if she were to betray Clovis to the twins. And it would be a wonderful evening. The Kaminskys were one of the richest families in Manus. Sergei's father, Count Kaminsky, owned huge plantations of rubber trees. He treated his workers well, and the money flowed in, not only from rubber, but from hardwoods and coffee and sugarcane. Maya had passed their house, a big mansion with pink walls and blue shutters and a garden full of flowering trees. There couldn't be anywhere better for a party. All through the dancing class she waited and hoped, but no invitation came to her. Well, she wouldn't beg for one, and when Sergei came to ask her to dance the final polka, she refused and went early to the changing room. Back in the Carters' bungalow, Maya hid her feelings, like she did from the twins and their parents. With Miss Minton, she was not so lucky. "Might one ask what's the matter with you?" asked the governess when they were alone. "And please don't say nothing. I hate wasting time." So Maya told her, and if she expected sympathy, she was very disappointed. "Really, Maya, you make me tired. Why don't you use your intelligence instead of your emotions? What do you really think happened to your invitation?" "Oh, but they wouldn't, surely." Miss Minton snorted. "It's time you grew up and defended yourself. I'm not going to sort this one out for you. You do it yourself." But before Maya could steel herself to confront the twins, Furo brought a message for her from the Kaminsky's house. It was from Sergei, asking her to bring Chopin's Mazurka when she came to the party because Olga wanted to learn one to surprise her father. "I think I won't say anything to the twins until we're getting ready to go," said Maya. "Then I'll surprise them." Miss Minton nodded. "The dark blue taffeta?" And Maya said yes. Finn's dog was called Rob, but no one used his name much. He was somehow all dogs rolled into one, with his trust and intelligence and faithfulness, and though he could hunt on his own and steady the canoe by putting his weight on the right place, he understood that when humans were upset, one had to sit there while they pulled one's ears, or buried their faces in one's back, or even cried. A dog who will allow himself to be cried over is worth his weight in gold. He had been Bernard Tavner's dog, and now he was Finn's, and other people did not interest him much. But he was always very polite to Maya, and as she rubbed his back and said, "I don't know how I'm going to get the twins to do what I want," he caught the worry in her voice and did not move away, though he heard some interesting noises in the bushes behind the hut. "It's quite easy," said Clovis, and Maya looked up, surprised, for Clovis was not usually a boy who found things easy. "It's just acting." "Yes, but I can't act." "Anyone can act," said Clovis. "There are just a few tricks. Techniques, they're called, but really they're just tricks." They had just finished afternoon tea in the hut, which was Clovis's favorite meal, but when it was cleared, he said, "Look, watch me." He went to the window of the hut and looked out, seeming to be interested in what he saw. Then he came back and sat down. After a while, he got up and did the same thing. The third time, Maya got up and followed him to the window. "You see," said Clovis, "if you go to the window twice, the third time people will always follow you. It's the same when you're pretending to give someone the slip, but really you want them to come after you. Don't pause and look round furtively. Just keep changing your pace. Sometimes dawdle, sometimes run." So while Finn checked the list of things that Clovis would need for his night in the museum, Clovis coached Maya in how to act the part of someone with a guilty secret. "Because they mustn't think I want to betray Finn," she said. "They know I wouldn't do that. They must think I've done it by mistake." Just before Firo came to fetch Maya, Finn called her aside and took something out of his pocket. "Look," he said, and held out to her a beautiful silver pocket watch on a long chain. He clicked it open and showed her the initials BT engraved inside. "Your father's?" "Yes, he gave it to me on my last birthday. It's the only thing he brought from Westwood. I feel I ought to give it to Clovis. It would make them absolutely certain that he was me." "But your father wanted you to have it." "Yes," Finn said, looking stricken. "But if it would help—" He shook his head. "Never mind, it's for me to decide." Then Firo's canoe came through the reeds, and Maya hugged Clovis and said goodbye. If everything went according to plan, he would be on the boat the day after tomorrow, and it was hard leaving him. "But I expect you'll come to England, won't you?" Clovis said. He had given her the address of his foster mother. "I really wish you were coming now," he said, and his eyes filled with tears. As Finn helped Maya into the boat, he leaned forward and whispered in her ear. "Don't worry about Clovis," he said. I'll see he's all right. I won't let him get too scared. I promised." And Maya nodded and got in the canoe and was paddled away. "That settles it," said Mr. Trapwood. "We are going back to the pension. We are going to pack. We're going to be on the Bishop the first thing tomorrow, and Sir Aubrey will have to send someone else. Nothing is worth another day in this hellhole." Mr. Lowe did not answer. He had caught a fever and was lying in the bottom of a large canoe owned by the Brothers of São Gabriel Mission, who had arranged for the Crows to be taken back to Manus. His eyes were closed, and he was wandering a little in his mind, mumbling about a boy with hair the color of the belly of a golden toad, which squatted in the lily leaves of the Marmari River. There had, of course, been no golden-haired boys. There hadn't been any boys at all. What there had been was a leper colony, run by the Brothers of St. Patrick, a group of Irish missionaries to whom the Crows had been sent. "They're good men, the Brothers," a man said on the dock, as they set off on their last search for the Tavner son. "They've taken all sorts of strays, orphans, boys with no homes. If anyone knows where Tavner's lad might be, it's them." and then he'd spat cheerfully into the river because he was a crony of the chief of police and liked the idea of Mr. Lowe and Mr. Trapwood spending time with the brothers, who were very holy men indeed and slept on the hard ground and ate porridge made from mannock roots and got up 4 times in the night to pray. The brothers' mission was on a swampy part of the river and very unhealthy, but the brothers thought only about God and helping their fellow man. They welcomed Mr. Trapwood and Mr. Lowe, said that they could look over the leper colony to see if they could find anyone who might turn out to be the boy they were looking for. "They're a jolly lot, the lepers," said Father Liam. "People who've suffered don't have time to grumble." But the crows, turning green, thought that there wouldn't be much point. Even if there was a boy here who was the right age, Sir Aubrey probably wouldn't think that a boy who was a leper could manage Westwood. Later, a group of pilgrims arrived who had been walking on foot from the Andes and were on their way to a shrine on the Madeira River, and the brothers knelt and washed their feet. "We know you'll be proud to share the sleeping hut with our friends here," they said to Mr. Lowe and Mr. Trapwood. And the crows spent the night on the floor with 12 snoring, grunting men, and woke to find 2 large and hungry-looking vultures squatting in the doorway. By the time they had returned to Manus, the crows were beaten men. They didn't care any longer about Taverner's son or Sir Aubrey or even the 100 pounds that they had lost. All they cared about was getting onto the bishop and steaming away as fast as could be done. Chapter 12. "Stay," said Finn to his dog. "Stay and guard the hut." The dog looked at him with despairing eyes and howled briefly. "You heard me," said Finn. "Stay." Another howl, and then the dog turned and threw himself down in front of the hut. "Will he really stay?" asked Clovis. "Of course, I won't be long." Finn was going to settle Clovis into his hiding place in the museum and then slip back to the lagoon. It was already almost dark, but Finn knew the waterways that led to Manus like the back of his hand. He was going to take Clovis in the canoe by the same route that he had taken Maya. There was plenty of time. Olga's party did not start for another couple of hours. It was not until the party was in full swing that Maya was going to start working on the twins. Finn had darkened his hair again. He wore his headband and a circlet of beads around his arm. Clovis was dressed in a cap and uniform of the cadets of the St. Joseph's School in Manus. Finn's father had tried to send him there, but after the first week Finn had come back, told Bernard that if he wanted Finn to go back, he would have to handcuff him and drag him there by his hair. If anyone caught a glimpse of them in the back streets of Manus as they made their way to the museum, they would think it was a boy from the college being taken back to school by his servant. "Right, I think we've got everything. The keys, a lamp, your satchel, the money so you can get to your foster mother. No, wait, there's something else." Finn felt into his pocket. "Here, I want you to have this." And he handed him Bernard Taverner's watch on its silver chain. Clovis stared, turning it over. "I can't take this. It's your father's, isn't it?" "Yes, but if you're going to be me, you better have it," said Finn, and turned away quickly, for it was harder than he had expected, giving away the watch he had seen so often in his father's hands. They pushed the canoe off, and Finn began to paddle out of the lagoon. The dog howled again, but he did not move, and then they were through the rushes and on their way. It was a silent journey. If they had to speak, they did it in whispers. Finn stopped where he had dropped Maya the first time they met and tied the canoe to a tree. He would make his way back as soon as Clovis was safe in the hiding spot. They waited for half an hour until it was entirely dark. There was no moon and no street lighting in the small lanes along which Finn led Clovis. As they came to the back door of the museum, they heard the sound of dance music coming from the Kaminsky house. The party had begun. Maya had said nothing to the twins about the party till it was time to get dressed. Then she disappeared into her room and came out in the last dress the matron of school in London had brought out with her before she went away. A dark blue rustling taffeta with a very full skirt and a row of tiny pearl buttons on the bodice. Miss Minton had brushed her waist-length hair and left it loose, and for a moment she almost forgot the job that faced her in the Kaminsky house. Then she and Miss Minton knocked on the twins' door. "I'm ready," said Maya. The twins stared at her. "But you're not going." "Oh, yes, I am. Sergei wrote to me. Miss Minton's going, too, to keep Mademoiselle Lily company and to help out. He said his father would send a boat for us if we couldn't go with you." The twins glared at her and tried a different tact. "You're too skinny to wear a low neckline, and your hair will get in a mess." "Shall I braid it again?" Maya asked Miss Minton, and her governess pursed her mouth and said, "No." The twins were dressed in their favorite party pink, rather a fleshy pink, which was perhaps a pity because their short necks were coming out in a double row of ruffles that made them look like those little hams that one see on butcher slabs near Christmas. They wore several bracelets, so that they tinkled as they walked, and they had had an accident with their mother's scent. Beatrice had taken some and sprinkled it behind her ears, and then Gwendolen had to try to take it from her, and the stopper had come off, so that they both smelled violently of passion in the night. Mrs. Carter did not mean to stay behind in the bungalow. She had invited herself to play bridge at the club and Manus. Mr. Carter came out to say goodbye, holding a small box containing the eye of a murderer who'd been hanged in Pentonville prison. It had arrived that morning, and it excited him very much. "Very nice," he said absently, looking at Maya's dress, and was glared at by his wife. The twins, too. "Very fetching." And he hurried back into his study. It was 9 o'clock before the Carter's cab drew up at the Kaminsky house. There were Chinese lanterns strung between the trees. The air smelled of orange blossoms. Music streamed from the windows. Maya had never been in such a sumptuous house. The walls were hung with rich tapestries and paintings of Russian saints framed in gold. Tubs of white lily and crimson poinsettias were massed on the sides of the staircases. Hundreds of wax candles glittered in the crystal chandeliers. Sergei and Olga now came running up to eat them. "You look like a beautiful wave with your dress and your hair," said Olga, touching the blue taffeta. And Sergei said that she must hurry because they were going to play a polonaise next. And we're good at polonaises, aren't we? Then the Count and Countess came out of the drawing room to greet them. The Count looked like a picture from a book about the Russian steppes, with a high-necked embroidered blouse, wise dark eyes, and a black beard. The Countess was a beautiful, untidy woman who wore a priceless emerald pendant slightly askew over her dress and enfolded Maya in a warm embrace. "The children have told me so much about you," she said, and held out her arm to the twins, who backed away. The twins did not get hugged. They always made that clear from the start. Mademoiselle Lily came to lead Miss Minton away, and soon the party was in full swing. After a while, Maya thought what a wonderful evening it would have been if she had just been an ordinary guest with nothing to do except for enjoy herself. The Kaminskys were the most amazing hosts. Rosewater was served to the dancers in crystal goblets. In the dining room, the food was laid out on a white damask cloth. It was like food from a fairy tale. Russian pierogies, rare Brazilian fruits, a 3-tiered cake for Olga's birthday, and the Count had found a proper band to play for them. But Maya was working to a timetable. Clovis would be safe in the museum by 10 o'clock. The Crows were already back in the Pension Maria. Between 10 and dawn the following morning, when the bishop pulled up her anchors, she had to betray Clovis's hiding place to the twins. She had to make sure that they would act. If only everyone hadn't been so nice to her, whisking her off to dance and to drink lemonade or to go into the garden. Not only Sergei and Olga and Netta, everyone. But at least it wasn't difficult to keep track of the twins. If she couldn't see them in their flesh-pink dresses or hear the tinkle of their bracelets, she could smell them, for they still moved in a cloud of their mother's passion of the night. 10 o'clock struck on the big grandfather clock in the hallway. Time to begin. Maya excused herself from the next dance and went to the big window, which looked out towards the docks. The twins, who were not dancing, watched her. Maya came back and circled the floor once with a Brazilian boy, then stopped and went back to the window. The twins were still watching her. "Oh, please, let Clovis be right," she prayed. For the third time, she turned to go to the window, and yes, Clovis was right. The twins were following her. "What are you looking at?" Maya swung around, startled. "Nothing. I just wondered when the bishop was sailing. It's tomorrow morning, right? They haven't put it off?" "Yes." "Why do you want to know?" "I don't know, really. I just wondered. Mr. Lowe and Mr. Trapwood are going to be on her, aren't they? They're definitely going back to England?" The twins exchanged glances. "What does it matter to you?" "It doesn't." Maya was beginning to look very flustered and guilty. "Doesn't at all." She made her way slowly to the door and left the room, allowing herself only one anxious glance at the twins. "Don't keep turning around," Clovis had said. "Don't overdo it." Beatrice and Gwendolen were now definitely suspicious. "Do you think she knows where the Taverner boy is?" "If she doesn't, why is she so jumpy?" "There's still time for the reward." "I'm not going to let her out of my sight," said Beatrice. "And I'm not either," said Gwendolen. Maya had paused on the landing. The Kaminskys had placed an icon there, a holy picture with a lamp burning underneath. The picture was of St. Theodosius, a very thin saint with huge black eyes. Maya had never prayed to a Russian saint before, but she heard the twins coming, and she fell to her knees. "Please," she gabbled aloud, "please keep him safe. Please don't let the Crows find his hiding place before they sail. Please." The twins had stopped on the stairs to listen. Now as Maya got to her feet, they followed her downstairs and into an empty cloakroom where the children had left their outdoor things when they arrived. Careful not to look back, Maya went to her bag. As well as her hairbrush and shoes, she'd hidden a packet of nuts and a sandwich wrapped in greaseproof paper. She took them out. Beatrice had come behind her, and now she wrenched her arm back, and Maya dropped the nuts. "Who are they for?" "You better tell us." "No one. For me." Maya was getting more and more flustered. "Don't be silly. The house is full of food. You were going to give them to someone, weren't you? The boy you're hiding." "Oh, no. No. Oh, please." Beatrice had taken Maya's arm and was twisting it. "You're hurting me. Stop it." There wasn't any need to act now. Beatrice really was hurting her. And now Gwendolyn took her other arm and jerked it back. "Let me go." "Not till you tell us where he is. Not till you admit you know." Real tears came to Maya's eyes as the twins, one on either side, yanked her arms still farther back. "It's only... oh, please. You don't want him to be caught. He doesn't want to go back to England. He's only a boy and he's so afraid." The twins gave grunts of satisfaction. They had caught her out. 2 more savage yanks, and then Gwendolyn took a hold of a handful of Maya's hair and twisted it away from her scalp. "Where is he? Quick. If you don't tell us, we'll really hurt you. And we'll scratch your face so that your precious Sergei won't want to look at you anymore." Maya gulped and sniffled, and it wasn't difficult. The twins, when in an evil mood, were surprisingly strong. "If I tell you, then will you let me go?" "Yes, unless you lie to us." "He's in the museum, in the Natural History Museum. Please, don't give him away. He's not a criminal and..." "Whereabouts in the museum?" The door was thrown open, and Sergei just stood there. "What are you doing? How dare you? Let her go." The twins dropped Maya's arm, and then they ran out past Sergei, leaving him alone with Maya. "They're fiends, those girls," he said, putting an arm around Maya. "What was it about?" "I can't tell you, Sergei, but it's all right. Trust me, it really is." "I'll kill them," muttered Sergei through clenched teeth. "I'll really kill them." But when he went to look for the twins, they were nowhere to be seen. That is all for today. We will pick up tomorrow with Chapter 13. We've been reading The Journey to the River Sea by Eva Ibbotson, illustrations by Kevin Hawkes, and published by Puffin Books. My name is Sarah Mari. I'm one of the librarians at Portland Public Library in Portland, Maine. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.